Howdy folks, I finally returned. I know I had some plans to do some stuff, but there was a lot going on. What I did was I took a fast for a few days, and basically because of my faith I had to give something up, and for a little while to show this isn't important, that bigger things are. So here I am back, and I just want to reiterate some things as well before we get into this first movie. And I do this 100% for entertainment purposes. I don't do this for political reasons. All are welcome to watch this channel. I do speak my mind, but my goal is not to offend anybody or take any sides. But also, slightly before I went on this fast, I was thinking about doing a Rob Reiner tribute and whatnot in some of the movies, but I decided to change my mind on that because, you know, it's a lot of things going on right now, and so of course that was a very, very tragic event. Again, not to take any sides, I didn't agree with Rob Reiner. I mean, but his politics. But you know what? The man made some pretty good movies, and so, I felt that the time had kind of gone past during that fast. That there were several other people posting videos in tribute to Rob Reiner and the films that he's made. So I thought, yeah, I don't really want to do that. And so, and we got this thing going on with the whole immigration thing. And so, again, I'm not going to take any sides. I am going to say how I feel, but that's neither here or there. I'm 100% doing this for entertainment. Okay, so, and of course, again, I did it for a fast reason, because some things you have to give up and to prove a point that you don't really need to do these things to live or anything like that, and that there's a bigger power, there's a greater power at work here. And so those are things that you have to give up to prove that point. So let's get back into this whole movie thing. So again, I'm not taking sides. So today, at this portion of this video, we're going to take a look at a film from 1980, which was, if you look at it politically, it is a very, very, very left-wing movie. But I enjoyed this movie for what it is at the time. It's a very, very funny film, because I think, even though it does lean to the left politically, everybody can relate to this, because why? Everybody has a boss. Okay, everybody has a job and a boss. Okay, so I thought, I haven't really, as far as I can recall, I've never talked about this film yet, but this is a fun one to pull out and watch. From 1980, released by 20th Century Fox, it is Lily Tomlin, Jane Fonda, and Dolly Parton, along with Dabney Coleman, in 9 to 5. Yeah, so let's gather around and take a look at 9 to 5. The film is rated PG, but this was pre-PG-13 material in here, so there's going to be some some things said and done in this film. But yeah, so let's dim the lights, or grab some popcorn, grab it, whatever it is you want to feel like grabbing to munch on or whatever, and let's watch 9 to 5.
20th Century Fox presents a tribute to anyone who has ever been overworked, underpaid, and pushed to the edge by an ungrateful boss. They arrive promptly at 9, because if they're not on time, they know they'll get the sack. But before they begin the daily grind, the boss takes his cup black. They remember each date, make sure he's not late, and keep everything organized. They reserve tables for brunch or a 3-martini lunch while they dine on burgers and fries.
Miss Rhodes.
They listen to all his problems. They do their best to please. And even if they run the show, he gets paid for their ideas.
Great work.
And so long as he's alive, from 9 to 5, they'll take it all they can.
Miss Rhodes, come in here.
But what will go on when the light finally dawns that it's time to get back at that man?
Miss Rhodes.
Jane Fonda, Lily Tomlin, and Dolly Parton. 9 to 5.
When 9 to 5 hit theaters in December of 1980, 20th Century Fox had a hit. And this, of course, the film was made on a budget of $10 million and grossed, let's see here, $103.3 million based on $10 million budget. Now, now you got to take into consideration that was a hit for the time. You know, ticket prices for a movie back in those days was maybe $3. So, so what this film was co-produced by IPC Films, which is Jane Fonda's own film production company, and it was directed by Colin Higgins. Colin Higgins, he didn't direct too much. He only made a handful of films before his death, unfortunately. He would go on from 9 to 5. His follow-up would be with Dolly Parton in The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. So let's go back to 9 to 5 here. So what goes on here is that we have three women here, played by Jane Fonda, Lily Tomlin, and Dolly Parton. Jane Fonda plays Judy Burnley, who's a recently divorced woman who's mostly been a stay-at-home wife for most of her life, and so she, after being divorced from her husband, or getting a divorce from her husband, she needs to find a job. And so she moves into this company called Consolidated Industries. Now, it's an office, and they don't really specify what type of office work they do. It's mostly paperwork, and so there's a loaded floor of men and women's secretaries. Excuse me, and so she's being trained by Lily Tomlin, who her name is Violet Newstead. She's a widow with 4 kids, and she is the supervising secretary of her section, and that leads into Dolly Parton. Dolly Parton is the personal secretary to the vice president, played by Dabney Coleman. And everybody thinks that, and of course, Mr. Hart has a thing for Dora Lee, Dolly Parton, and he's really attracted to her. He's trying to get her to have an affair with him, but at first she's kind of ignorant to it, and she thinks everybody's kind of looking at her funny, and because they assume that she is, but no one wants to be friends with her. But then when the things get set straight, that Violet blows it open to Dorley. Say, hey, he's been the one saying that you've been having an affair with him, and she's like, who's been saying that? And then she confronts him. And so that's not where the story ends. So Hart, played by Dabney Coleman, they describe him in the film as a sexist, egotistical, lying, hypocritical bigot. And so that's what he is. I mean, it's pretty much a nose to the grindstone. He loves to torment people in the office, and it's not a pretty picture. It's, we all have bad bosses, or we've all had bad bosses at some point in time, but take that and put it to 11. Crank that up to 11, because because it's almost the way it's Dabney Coleman plays him is that it's too over the top. But we do know that things like this do go on. I mean, there have been supervisors and bosses who have had affairs with their secretaries and stuff like that. But these three women have enough of him. And so one day, after having a really bad day with him, they decide to go off to the bar and tie one on, and involves something else that would never be in a PG rated movie today. Take that what you will, what that is. And so they go back to Dolly Parton's character's house, and while partaking in this certain substance, they have fantasies of what they would like to do to him. And at first it's Judy, played by Jane Fonda. She has a fantasy that is in sepia tone, where she is like a Western bounty hunter, and there's a lynch mob, which is basically all the secretaries in the entire office are out to get him. And it ends with her shooting him in the bathroom stall and mounting him on the office wall like he did a deer. And then the second fantasy is Dolly Parton, Dorley. She has this fantasy that that's more of a Western, more over the top, cartoony Western fantasy, where it's role reversal, where she puts the moves on him rather than him putting the moves on her, and how he feels uncomfortable with it, and hog ties him and hangs him out on a stake and leaves him out for the coyotes. And then it goes to Lily Tomlin's character, Violet. She has a fantasy where everything is kind of like out of a Disney fairy tale. As a matter of fact, she's in a Snow White type costume, and she has all the cartoon woodland critters dancing around her and so on and so forth, and she puts something in the boss's coffee that could lead to his death, and then thus freeing all the employees from the office work slavery, and then there's a special effect shot of like a fairy tale castle drifting away in the clouds, and then it fades out and goes into the next day. Well, Violet actually accidentally does put rat poison in real life in the boss's coffee. And there's this gag with the office chair that Hart sits in, that there's a bad spring in it. Like he sits in, and then all of a sudden he leans back, and you hear ping, and then he falls backwards. But he never took a drink of coffee. And there's this office snitch. Her name is Roz, but she's played by Elizabeth Wilson, and she's like says here she's a personal assistant, and she's an eavesdropper. She's like hiding in the bathroom stalls and then like writing down and recording all the gossip that takes place in the ladies' bathrooms. and so they hear that, so Mr. Hart hears that, oh, they accidentally put poison in the coffee. He never did it. He went to the hospital with a bump on his head and blah, blah, blah. So he takes the whole thing of, oh, you tried to murder me, and goes from there. And so they said, no, we are... Dorley actually does hog tie him, so a little bit of their fantasies do come true. Judy shoots at him, Dorley hog ties him, and Violet puts poison in the coffee, which was all in their fantasies. And so they take him and they tie him up in the boss's house and make sure he's nowhere near the office for like a month. And they know that the one person that's the eavesdropper, Roz, she's going to pick up on something. So they devise a plan to send her to France to learn how to speak French, and so that would be, she would be gone for several weeks. Because there's another thing. They discover that there's this warehouse that's supposedly to be filled with inventory, but it is vacant. And that's a crime. So that's where they could have gotten the boss. But instead, what happens is that Hart escapes and drags them back to the office. And in the meantime, the three women have made the working environment better. They've put color, they've repainted walls and put new furniture in, and adjusted some of the jobs to like more of a job. They incorporate what's called a job sharing program. Like one person comes in works from like maybe works six. They have two people that work 6 hours a day, but yet the same amount of work is accomplished. And they also incorporate flexible hours in a children's daycare center. All these things that Mr. Hart would never even want to do. And he sees that. He's furious. He walks in the office, like sees all these changes, and he's immediately going to get on the phone and call the cops and say, here's all my evidence that they kidnapped me, they did all this, this, and this. And then he's going to reverse all the stuff that they put in. Well, then and then immediately the chairman of the board, played by Sterling Hayden, who's credited as a guest appearance, really, he comes and says, hey, this man's doing great work here. There's there's been a huge improvement on his floor. And so basically he gets promoted out of the position and gets asked to go to work for him at the company's Brazilian office. So thus he's being promoted out of the seat, and they do and so that leaves the women like, hey, he's out of here for good. So, but then the movie does a a post, whatever you call it, where they show like what happens to the characters after the story. That Violet got promoted to the vice president position. Dorley left to become a country and western singer, and Judy ends up marrying the Xerox man. And of course, there's a scene in the film very early on in which she has a little bit of trouble with the Xerox machine. So 9 to 5. This is a fun movie, and I know I said it does lean to the left, but I was looking up the Wikipedia page. Even President Reagan, who was very conservative president, he liked it, except for the one scene that, as I aforementioned, that they used a certain substance in order to have their fantasies. But as you know, Ronald Reagan and Carter, in terms of presidents, really loved their movies, and I forget how many movies. It was record number that how many movies that President Carter screened while he was in office. Now, this would have been during Reagan would have just been elected at this time, and so, but even he enjoyed 9 to 5. He, except for the one part, he said, other than that, this was a enjoyable, entertaining film, and it very much is, because we all have bosses, regardless of what our political beliefs or whatever gender we are. We all have bosses that we don't. We all have bosses. That being said, they are flawed people. Not every single one of them is bigots. Not every single one of them is sexist or hypocritical or anything like that. There is good bosses out there. But this was like a tip of the hat to the people who have to deal with the boss that's troublesome. And a lot of times those bosses are the ones who do get a lot of the promotions and move up. So they showed that that what had to happen to Franklin Hart Jr. is that he had to be promoted out of the chair and sent someplace where promoted into a position that he didn't really want to be in. So, and it's laughable. Even the post story, what they say happens to the characters. He's the fourth one, and they said that he was kidnapped by an Amazonian tribe and never seen or heard from again. So. Yeah, 9 to 5. Okay, so this is a fun movie, and like I said, it does take a political side, but I also read where it with Jane Fonda as the producer, she said, we don't want this to be too preachy, so we must bring it back to the center a little bit. So. That's why it's a comedy. And so, and my first encounter with this movie, I didn't understand it. The first time I saw it, I think I was around 7 years old, I think. And I was staying with my grandmother's house, who had cable TV at the time. And there was a brand new movie channel that had come onto the scene at the time, called Encore. Encore is still around, but it's now a premium pay cable. But when it first launched, it was not. It was part of a basic cable program, and this was when Encore was called the movie hits of the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And so that's where I first saw 9 to 5, and she, of course, taped it off of the Encore channel, and I guess in a way I've kind of mimicked what Encore does, and Turner Classic Movies does the same thing. Is that there's a host that introduces the movie and then talks about talks about the movie. Now, they don't do a post comment. It was always they hosted the movie for like 3 minutes. They did like a 3-minute introduction, giving a little bit of behind the scenes trivia, and then when that last minute came in, that's when they played the credits and all that stuff, and gave the rating, and then here's our feature presentation, and movie starts. And so that's where I first saw 9 to 5, and Grandma had taped it off TV. I was probably, even though this was a PG rated movie, I would give this, if I was to re-rate it today, I would definitely I'd be giving it the PG-13. This was made before PG-13, so that's why you were able to get by with the certain scenes and the certain language. Now, there was no F-bomb dropped in this movie, but there was a ton of other words being used. But it would, and plus some of the content, there was some crude content. Obviously with the boss having a thing with the main having a thing with his secretary. Yeah, that wouldn't fly in a PG movie today. I mean, pretty much PG rated movies today are kids movies. But back in the day, a PG just meant something. I meant that parental guidance suggested, meaning that there's some things in these film that you may not want your kids to either repeat or do. So, but yeah, 9 to 5. It's a fun movie. I think that's all about to say about it. But the other thing I was going to say about it, even though it does lean to the left, it's not very politically correct. It's it's because it does kind of poke fun at those situations, and that even though they do exist, I mean, we would be lying if they didn't exist. That there is the boss who does do those things to their secretaries and personal assistants. That's why now we have sexual harassment clauses, and unfortunately that does not always protect, even though the companies these days, they do their best to try and try to take care of those situations. I myself have not had that sort of experience. However, I did have a boss that did do that and was terminated because of that. It was just a matter of time before that person was caught. And I'm not going to name names, but that happened 10 years ago at least. But I got along. I actually liked the boss, but apparently some other people, he was putting the moves on some people, and obviously they didn't like that too much, and rightfully so. They did take care of it. So 9 to 5. So that's going to do it for this segment. I don't know when this video will be coming out, but we're going to move on to the next film, so stay tuned for that. Okay, so we're now to the next feature. And so this time we're going to take a look at a film from the early 1970s. And now this film was following a trend of what was going on in the 1970s blockbuster feel. Okay, so I say blockbuster feel because these were the most popular movies that were kind of going on at the time. And so, and by the 1970s, Hollywood kind of went cynical with some of their depictions of what heroes should look like. And so, thus they began a huge tradition of making disaster films. And it's hard to say which one was the first one, but the trend kind of started in 1970 with Universal Pictures release Airport. And then there's a string of sequels to that franchise. Yes, in the 70s they made a franchise of Airport. And then there was this film, and then there was The Towering Inferno, Earthquake, Roller Coaster, and so on and so forth. These were the most popular films of the late 60s, early 70s. The disaster film. And still to this day, we still see disaster films being made. You know, think about movies like Titanic and Twister, and and they've even done sequels to Twisters. The disaster film has never fully went away, but back in the 70s, this was a popular trend of the brand of movies that were coming out. So which one am I talking about? Well, this was from 1972, and it has become it became kind of the staple of the disaster picture, and it is Irwin Allen's The Poseidon Adventure from 1972, released by 20th Century Fox, directed by Ronald Neame. And so, let's take a look at it. Again, from 1972, here's Gene Hackman, Ernest Borgnine, Red Buttons, Roddy McDowall, and Shelley Winters, just to name a few of some of the cast that's in this film. So, here we go. The Poseidon Adventure.
Port bound.
Ladies and gentlemen, your attention, please. It is exactly 50 seconds to midnight.
Hard left! Get up a mayday. Oh my God.
That's the way out. That's our only chance.
Don't listen to him. We've got to stay here till help arrives.
Help from where? From the captain? He's dead.
The boat tilted and he fell. The shaft blew up and he's dead. And that's it. Or do you want to make something more out of it?
Johnny, keep your eyes on the ladder. Don't look at anything except the ladder.
I want you to give this to our little grandson, huh?
Why, I'm going somewhere you're not going?
Hold it. Do you know what a flash fire is? Well, mister, I'm not going to let you kill us.
I'm going through that door, Mr. Rogo. You need to stand aside and close that door to keep the air from coming in, or you can try to stop me. I was going to get everybody out of here, and damn it, I'm going to do it!
So in the Poseidon Adventure, well, what happens is the USS or the SS Poseidon is on her maiden voyage from New York to Athens. It was a luxury ocean liner, fictitious of course, but she's making her way on a final run from New York to Athens. While on New Year's Eve, she's struck by a 90-foot tidal wave, thus entrapping her occupants. And a few of the survivors, or these survivors I should say, find a way, hey, we're not going to stay down here floating upside down, we're going to get out of here. And so they make their way from the dining hall all the way up through the engine room into the propeller shaft, where the hull is only 1 inch thick steel. That's where it's the thinnest. And so this film was at the time, was kind of a tough gamble for 20th Century Fox, because at that time Fox was making huge musicals, and they had failed in returns on films like Hello Dolly and several of these musicals that came out at that time. They were not performing very well, and so producer Irwin Allen, who is famous for the TV shows Lost in Space and several other shows, this was his dream project, to actually make a full-length, get back to his heart, which was full-length feature film. And so with that, he had the green light from 20th Century Fox that they were going to make this film, until one day he was summoned to the studio chief's office and said, "We're canceling your movie." And the only thing that they could guarantee, well, he finally got them to say, "Hey, I can still make this movie if you will give me $2.5 million. Well, they agreed. Fox agreed. But Irwin Allen knew that he needed $5 million to pull it off. So, as an effort to get the rest of the budget, Allen did not have that kind of money on hand. But he knew some people who did. So he goes across the street to a country club where the theater chain owners of Metropolitan Theaters guaranteed $2.5 million. And they said, "Sure, go ahead. Just don't interrupt our gin rummy game again." So, the film got made. But also, this was a return to what classic Hollywood would have done, because of the actors who were involved with this. This was pretty much an all-star cast. The main star here was Gene Hackman as Reverend Frank Scott, he's a preacher who's questioning his faith. Definitely, he's really unorthodox in his preaching, but he's the one that said, "Hey, we can do this." He's the one that's putting faith in themselves to leave get out of the ship. And we have Ernest Borgnine, who's very much a doubter. He is Detective Lieutenant Mike Rogo, and he is married to Stella Stevens, her character Linda Rogo, and we find out that she was a former prostitute and that he is now married to her. Okay. Also, we have Red Buttons as James Martin. He is a kind of a loner, like me. He's just kind of a loner, and he's just taking vitamins and stuff like that. Carol Lindley as Nani Perry. She is the singer of the band that's performing in the lounge area. And we have Roddy McDowall as Mr. Akers. Shelley Winters and Jack Albertson play Mr. and Mrs. Rosen. Pamela Sue Martin as Susan Shelby. Eric Shea as Robin Shelby, their brother and sister. And we also have Leslie Nielsen as the captain of the ship, Captain Harrison. And so the ship, so this was a movie that really put the stock in the disaster genre. Like I said, this was in the middle of a trend that was going on in Hollywood. And so, like, I can't tell you, like, what was the first of the disaster films, other than Airport was an earlier one, and this came in between that and Earthquake. And so, but Irwin Allen, after the success of this film, 20th Century Fox was like, hey, you made a successful movie, you can make another one. And so his next project would be The Towering Inferno. Now, that was a little bit more complicated because, like the Poseidon Adventure, they were both based on best-selling books. But the Poseidon Adventure was one book. Now, The Towering Inferno was based on two books. 20th Century Fox owned one book, and Warner Brothers owned the other book. So, for The Towering Inferno, that was a 20th Century Fox Warner Brothers co-production, because what they did was they looked at both stories and said, well, they're very, very similar, let's put them together. And so, but that was, that's The Towering Inferno. But the Poseidon Adventure was based on a book by Paul Gallico. Screenplay was by Sterling Celephant and Wendell Mays. Sterling Celephant had won the Academy Award several years before for In the Heat of the Night. And also, this is one of John Williams' early film scores, one of his earlier film scores that he had made himself. So, yeah, and of course, director Ronald Neame. The film was a hit, became like the blueprint of the disaster film for many years, and we still see disaster films to this day. And of course, the film had a sequel that came out in 1979. However, it was not successful. Yeah, it came out in 1979 with Michael Caine as the leader of the cast of that. But that was the Poseidon Adventure from 1972. So stay tuned. We'll have another film coming up pretty shortly. Well, last night I decided to, rather than pull out a DVD or a Blu-ray, decided to go to the movies. I hadn't been there in a while, and so what was playing? So I went to see I Can Only Imagine 2. It's from the same people that did the original. There was only one difference, and that was a cast switch. The actress who played Shannon in the original film did not return. She was replaced by another actress by the name of Sophie Skelton, playing Bart's wife, Shannon. Now, this film is about the creation of their song, Even If. Even If was their biggest selling single since I Can Only Imagine. But what led up to that is personal crises that that come upon the band, their families, and so what happens in I Can Only Imagine is that the film opens with a montage of them going throughout the years. They won all these awards for I Can Only Imagine, and it's still touching people's lives. But then Bart and Shannon eventually settle down. They start a family, and their oldest son, Sam, he's the closest to Bart, and they have this bond where right before Bart leaves on tour to go play concerts and come back home in a couple days, he says, choose a song, and he hands him his iPod. And it's usually U2's, I can't think of the name of the song, but it's U2 wrote a praise song back in the 80s, I believe. It just says, I want to sing a new song. I want to sing a new song. And it's, I can't think of the name of it. Maybe you guys know what it is. I'm not a big U2 fan, but they always listen to that song. And finally they go out on tour and come back. Then it's while out on tour they discover that Sam has a medical condition, type 1 diabetes, even for a small child. They were able to catch it in time, and they find out about this because they're having a costume party. I think it's a birthday party, or maybe a birthday party or Halloween. I'm not sure what it is, but Sam has a seizure. And so Bart rushes home. They administer insulin to him, and it's something that he's going to have to deal with the rest of his life. I am type 2 myself, so I'm on several different drugs. I have to take them regularly. I mean, I can't go without them. And so, fast forward a few years later, Bart and Shannon agree to take Sam, and now who's a late teenager, take him out on tour. And Bart is struggling with a severe case of writer's block. He hasn't been able to come up with an interesting material for new projects, new tours, new records. And so he's suffering a severe case of writer's block. And the only thing he has written down in his notebook is, "This will never change." This one sentence. And they also pick up a guy who's a young singer-songwriter, but he's fairly new to the music business, by the name of Tim Timmons. And so they go out on tour, but they notice something's wrong with Tim. Is right before a show starts, he's up chucking in the toilet. But he just brushes it off. Hey, don't worry about it. Let's go out there and give praise to God. And Bart this time he's just furious. He's not furious, but he's frustrated with how his son's taken to Tim. Not that there's anything wrong with that. He's not doing anything wrong, but Bart is becoming obsessive with Sam's insulin intake and how he's just kind of putting it off. And so he's like, you need to take your medicine, take your medicine, take your medicine. And there's another seizure that happens later on in the film with Sam. But that's for him personally to say, hey, you need to take your medicine when you're told. But we find out that he's terrified of needles and getting shots and stuff like that. But also there's the father-son issue going on there with that eventually Bart, what has happened with Bart is that he has in a way become his dad, Arthur. And it's who was played by Dennis Quaid. He finds out in a way he kind of became Arthur, Dennis Quaid's character from the first film, became his father, and it's up to him to break that cycle. And because no one, I'm not a parent, but no one tells you how to be a dad. And so there's that bonding and rekindling relationship with Sam and Bart, how they work out together. And then with Tim, we find out that Tim is terminally ill cancer. Again, he's a singer-songwriter. He's just made it into the business, and he's opening up for Mercy Me. And so he's struggling with this one song, and Bart comes in. He's frustrated. He's got the writer's block. He's frustrated with his son. And Tim says, hey, I've got the chorus to this song. It's a really good song, but I need the verses and the bridge. And Bart was like, no, I don't want to touch this. And then Tim just spills out, hey, I'm terminally ill. I just found out my wife is pregnant with their first child. Yeah, and you see the relationship with Tim and his wife. She's a nurse, and of course he's kind of goofy in some ways, but also he hands Bart this CD that has the chorus and has what he has of the song, gives it to him, and says, see if you can fin it. If you don't want it, toss it. But also the entire time, Tim, when he goes up on stage, is he shares the story of the behind the song, It Is Well With My Soul, which is an old hymn. How the writer of that song, he lost his home, he lost his family in a shipwreck, he lost his home in a fire, and he goes on to say, they eventually all come to the conclusion, and they're reminded of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the story in the Bible, and how King Nebuchadnezzar wanted to burn them for not worshiping this false idol, wanted to kill them. But they would not give up on God, and that God was in the midst of all that. Because if you read that story, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, 3 men, okay? But when they were tossed into the furnace, people saw 4 men. 4 men, not 3. As a matter of fact, some of the guards or the people that lit the fire were, if they went to open it up, they were consumed by the fire. They were killed. And the point that they come to is that, God's in the midst of the fire. And God's in the storm. And even Tim has his own health scare where he's in the hospital and he's terminally ill, but this story does have a happy ending that he goes into complete remission and he is cancer free. Him and his wife now have 4 children. But it all leads to the composition of the song Even If, which is Mercy Me's biggest selling single since I Can Only Imagine. And it's a powerful song. This film was just as good as the original I Can Only Imagine. But I will say, sitting in the theater, I had tears running down because I'm going through stuff right now too. And just a reminder, I needed to see it because I needed something outside of parents and pastors, and not that I'm angry or bitter towards them. I needed to hear it from something else, that God's in the fire, God's in the storm. He's never left. That's the moral of the story. And what led to a song is, the core message for everybody is that Jesus and God never left. They're in the midst of what we're going through. So do go check it out. It's currently now playing in a theater near you. So do go out to the theaters. Theaters are struggling right now because of the whole streaming thing and post-COVID and dwindling on the audiences. But so here's a good story that's worth the money to go see in a theater. Sit with other people and watch. So I Can Only Imagine 2 now playing, so do go check it out. So with that, I think I'm going to move on to the next one. Okay, so we're going to go on to the last film of this video, and I know it took about a month for it to be completed. And I had to double check, see if I talked about this one before, because I think I have over the various videos and talked about Disney animation, but we're actually going to take a look at the flop from 1985. It is The Black Cauldron. Yeah, from 1985. It runs about 80 minutes, and we're going to look and see what made The Black Cauldron such a dud in the terms of Disney animation. So let's gather around. This is available, I know, on Disney Plus. So I was able to, as far as like in terms of retail stores, it never went as far as DVD. But the only way that you could get it on Blu-ray is if you were a member of the now ill-fated Disney Movie Club. But so that being said, let's don the lights or whatever it is. Let's watch The Black Cauldron from 1985 by Walt Disney Pictures. So that was Disney's The Black Cauldron from 1985. This was a mess of a movie. There's not a, I can't really describe the story to you other than that they tried to simplify, what Disney tried to do is they tried to simplify 3 different books, a series of books, down to one film. And that's that's a common thing when they adapt books for the screen. Especially Disney, they like to Disneyfy it, and of course, this is a dark fantasy story, and I don't think there was really a good way to tell this and have it be very faithful. And of course, to summarize what is going on in the film, we have this little farmer boy by the name of Taran. He lives with... Yeah, he lives with Dalbin. He is just this. They caretake. They're basically farmers, and but they have to care for this pig by the name of Henwin. And Henwin has a special power of seeing things, and so Taran also believes that he's going to be a great warrior someday. And in the midst of this land, there is the Horned King, who's this dark, evil presence, and the Horned King is looking for this black cauldron where it's nothing but concentrated evil, and the pig knows, because of its ability to see things, it knows where this cauldron is kept because it's held in secret. And along the way we meet a few friends while trying to protect the pig, because it's revealed that Henwin knows where this cauldron is, and so they have to hide Henwin, hoping that the Horned King doesn't find Henwin, and where Henwin will tell where the Horned King is. Well, you know where this is going. Eventually, it's a Disney movie, so eventually bad things happen. But also we meet some friends. We have Princess Alonwi, who's just this girl. She pops up. We don't even know what she's a princess of. They just call her Princess Alonwi. She's not really a good princess. And then we have... Fife Widow Flam, who's this minstrel, a bad minstrel. And we also meet Gurgi, who's just this little terrier-like creature, and he's pickpocketing people for what he calls his munchings and crunchings, which is basically food. And that's pretty much who we have on the good side. And also, the Horned King has a henchman by the name of Creeper. And this movie is really just a mess. It's just... there's plot holes galore. Like, you don't even know what Princess Alonwi is. I mean, she's just this girl that pops up. We don't know what princess that she's the kingdom of. It really is just a mess of a movie. It was apparently a project that had been in development for years, and it had been in development in production for 7 years, and usually the lifespan, the production span of a hand-drawn animated film is like 3 to 4 years, but in this case they took 7 years because there were so many problems that they were trying to figure out. Condensing 3 books, which is the books that it's based on, is the Chronicles of Prydain by Lloyd Alexander. That's the series of books. And so they were trying to condense 3 stories into one story. I guess they took influence from Ralph Bakshi and Lord of the Rings. But however, that's, as you can, as well as the Ralph Bakshi Lord of the Rings film, the film really suffered from that by it has got both of these films have garnered a following over the years, but when they came out, they were box office flops. As a matter of fact, with the Black Cauldron, this came out during the Disney regime change, when everything switched from the old Ron Miller produced Disney movies, which he is credited as executive producer, but this was the film that Jeffrey Katzenberg took over as the president of Walt Disney Pictures. And when this film was in he took over when the film was in production, and he's looking at scenes and he's not happy. And matter of fact, ordered changes to the film after years of completed animated scenes were printed onto film. He ordered some things to be cut out, and he didn't understand how animated films work. Jeffrey Katzenberg had come from Paramount, but he came from Paramount's film and television division, where everything was in live action, and Paramount did release a few animated features, but those were purchased by Paramount and not produced by Paramount, if that makes any sense. And so he ordered things to be cut out, and there was because the scene towards the end, at the fall of the villain, which is the Cauldron-born scene, that was supposed to be way longer, but Katzenberg looked at that scene and just went, "This is too dark and it's too scary. It's going to be frightening to children," and whom they were going to market this film to. And it's, even with all those changes, it still walked away with a PG rating, which was a first for a Disney animated film at the time. And that was kind of a to get a PG rating for an animated film back at that time was it was taboo. It was kind of taboo, because that meant to parents back in 1985, it meant something when a PG rated movie was released, that it was parental guidance suggested, meaning that there was things in this film that you may not want your kids to see. And of course, this was during the regime change, when it went from Ron Miller as the president of Walt Disney Productions to everything being changed over to Michael Eisner and Frank Wells and Jeffrey Katzenberg taking over and becoming the Walt Disney Company. And so this was the film that they were making before that change, but the change happened when the film was near completion, and they knew it was going to flop. I mean, they did their best to promote it, and hopefully it was a hit, but they had spent millions and millions of dollars on the production of this film, an animated film, and it didn't do very well. Matter of fact, I looked up the budget for the film. The budget for the Black Cauldron was $44 million. That was a ridiculous amount of money back in 1985. That's a pretty big budget. It made back half. Just half. $21.3 million. Not even half. So, yeah, that's how bad it bombed. And now, the thing for that to be successful, they would have had to have made around $80 million at the box office. And when they only bring in 21.3 million, it's a flop. Yeah. They're about 60 million shy. So, and also to add insult to injury, The Black Cauldron was released around the same time as the Care Bears movie. They were beaten out by the Care Bears movie. Think about that. So, there's a reason why this movie has taken a long time. It has a following to it, and I think that's why Disney held off for so long. They released it to theaters. It did what it did, and it flopped, but they did not release it on home video until late 1990s, like 1997, 1998 was when The Black Cauldron saw its first home video release. That's crazy. I mean, but once it came out on home video, it sold pretty well, and of course it made its way to DVD. Of course, the only way that you could get this onto Blu-ray, which they did release it as, was on the Disney Movie Club. That's the only way that you could get onto Blu-ray. Other than that, if you were lucky in a store to find the DVD copy, I mean, that was it. But if you want to watch it in glorious high definition, Disney Plus. So, now, what was interesting about The Black Cauldron was where they failed in the storytelling, they kind of made up for in the technical. And again, $44 million, as the budget, but you can see where they really tried to push things. And the first thing they did was they released the movie and photographed the animation in 70 millimeter, which I believe at that time was the first animated film since Sleeping Beauty to be released in 70 millimeter. And so it had been a while, and so the animators had to remind themselves on how to animate using 70 millimeter photography. They couldn't just use their regular animation paper. They had to use different animation paper. They had to learn how to frame things within the 70 millimeter frame. And so the other thing was, it was one of the first, if not the first, animated film to use CGI as a tool to help the animation. Now, some key things where CGI was used was Princess Alonwi's bubble, her little light bubble that's around her. That was all CGI. And some of the shots with the cauldron itself was in CGI. Now, how it worked was, but it was still put together optically. The inking and painting was still done traditionally. Actually, they still used the Xerox process for this film, and you can kind of see that some of the lines around the characters are a little bit more scratchy and a little bit more yeah, a little bit more scratchy and more they stand out as something that's processed. And the next film that they did, which was Oliver and Company, was the last film to use the Xerox process. And because after that they went to The Little Mermaid, and that was animated the same way that Walt Disney animated Snow White, which was every single cell was traced with ink and painted by hand. And even that film used CGI, but yeah, The Black Cauldron was the first film to use CGI to do certain effects and certain scenes. And of course it was the first film since Sleeping Beauty to be photographed in 70mm. And of course that's how it was released. So that's going to close up this video. We'll be back next time. I kind of want to do a little tribute to Robert Duvall, so I'm thinking about that. So I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but hopefully you enjoyed the movies that we watched in this video. And so from me to you, see you later.